Hello, friends and students. I'm going to need your patience and compassion for this video because there's a lot we're going to be going over, and there's a lot I just added because I want to make sure, particularly because this is April. Welcome to April, which is Poetry Month. I don't want to, especially because, there's something essential we're losing in translating our course that was supposed to be in-person and in-person discussion to online. I want to make sure that we're really honoring the poetry section. So I'm going to be doing some more lecture type stuff today than I was planning on, and a little bit more than I'm comfortable with. So we will be relying on the book. But I have a bunch of other poems to bring to you as well that are outside of the book, which I'm excited about. So this may be a longish video, and for that I apologize in advance. Okay, so some notes before we get started on that. First, when you are submitting work, please make sure you are submitting it via Google Docs to my Gmail account that you have, which is drapolieanne@gmail.com. Make sure you are not attaching or sending or sharing a PDF. If you share a PDF, even if I open it in Google Docs, when I open it in Google Docs, I can, but it reformats your whole paper, and it makes it visually very difficult for me to edit or read. I can't really even see where your paragraph breaks are. It makes it look like a long, very strange and rambling poem. And it's just very frustrating. I'm trying to be as considerate as I can of what you all are going through translating your learning to online learning when that's not what you signed up for, but this is not what I signed up to teach either. So please share via Google Docs, make sure it's a doc. I don't even know what it looks like when you share the link, but you can export it to PDF or doc and make sure that it's a document. Some folks are still attaching Word docs. That's easier for me to translate into Google Docs, but please just use Google Docs if you're having trouble with that. I'm sure that there's a tutorial on YouTube or something I can find for you. Okay, I've got some questions about the syllabus. As of right now, I am following the syllabus, but I'm also adding to it, which is what I have been doing this whole time. What's on the syllabus is super thorough, but what's on the syllabus, I always augment. I always add things as we go. I do this every semester. I change the syllabus every semester to reflect my students, but it's based on former semesters, and as we move through the semester, there's usually one or two things I add or take away depending on how we're doing, what we're doing for time, and what your interests are. So use the syllabus as much as you would before, but due dates are off because we were already behind, and so use it for orientation to the book. So like the syllabus is correct about what you're reading and when you should read it. I'm adding things to that. So if you don't want to look at the syllabus again, that's fine. I haven't spent the time to rewrite the syllabus right now because I think the rewrite would be so complete. That would be like writing a new syllabus, and I don't frankly have time for that because I'm still doing your essays, and these videos take a tremendous amount of time and energy to make, as does the sort of paying attention and responding to and monitoring the online discussion stuff we've been doing. So if the syllabus is helping you, go ahead and use it. If it's confusing you, don't use it, and rely on my emails and these videos, please. If once I get caught up, I would love to write down what we're doing and what we've done. Maybe I can do that for the drama unit. But right now, the priority is getting you feedback and keeping the course materials going, and that has just taken all of the time. Okay, so your essays and midterm grades. So I'm still working on the essays. which is one of the things that's taking me a lot of time. I do have some specific notes on essays, or I will have specific notes on essays. I thought I'd be able to do that this video, but I'm not going to be able to because I haven't gotten enough of a sample of your essays graded to know what we need to work on as a class. But I will follow up with a video specifically on writing skill. I think I'll make it separate from our instructional video on the content, so that you don't get confused. You know, it won't be couched or hidden in a video of poetry. It'll just be like, here's the writing stuff that English 102 needs to work on. So, I don't know if you all heard, but the college is extending you the opportunity to take pass-fail for this semester for all classes. So, if you take pass-fail, that means that that's what shows up on your transcript. So, pass, of course, means you pass the course and you get credit for it. However, if you were going to pass with a low grade that you think might influence or impact your entire GPA, but if you know you're going to pass, but you think it will mess up your GPA, it's a good option because you can get the credit without it costing your GPA anything. So I'm glad the colleges decided to do that. I'm still calculating all your grades, so if you want to know what your grades are, I will have those available to you. I wanted to get up your midterm grades by Monday. I did not. I missed that deadline. So I'm hopefully going to have your essays returned to you with feedback by Friday, and the midterm grades up by Friday as well. I am not taking rewrites for these essays unless I specifically ask you to rewrite. The feedback is so that you can learn from this essay and apply it to your next essay. So we are not doing traditional drafting outside of you drafting with each other and doing peer edits for this class because it's not English 101 and because we're really focusing on writing through reading. So my feedback will always be extensive, but it's not quite as extensive as 101, and I just don't have the physical ability to turn around your essays twice unless there's an essay that is just, struggling so much that I think that you would benefit from a rewrite. For students who really do need that level of intervention, I'm very happy to give that, but I can't accept rewrites for the whole class. So I'll contact you individually if that's something that I think would be best for you. And you can contact me individually directly if you have a request around that. But because time is so short right now, and because just the transition to online has just been very time consuming for me. If you are a person who has, a B+ in the class and you got an 84 on your essay, I'm going to be less likely to accept a rewrite from you than someone who's working with a 60 and has great ideas but needs intervention with writing. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so your next two essays, we have two more essays to do and a final. We would have been starting to work on our second essay at this point. We're not, obviously. There's some more stuff to do with regard to poetry. Also, I'm going to rethink what I want that essay assignment to be. One of your essays has to have a research component, but I'm not quite sure what makes the most sense for us, given all the changes that have happened. And I still want to look at, like I said, all of the essays and have a sense of what our class specifically needs with regard to instruction and what would be the best help for all of you, right? Okay, office hours. So I sent an email about this, but for your class from 9 to 11 on Friday morning, and of course I'll extend this if that would be helpful to folks, I'm giving 10-minute slots. 10 minutes is almost no time at all. It's enough time for a check-in. It's not a great amount of time for clarifying or giving individual tutorials. So if we need more time, I'm not anticipating people. No, I don't think all the slots are filled. I don't actually think any of the slots are filled for your class. I didn't check it today, but I've checked it the last few days. But if we need more time, of course I'm going to extend more time. So if I need to add an hour, that's totally fine. Also, if you want to schedule an individual appointment with me for a little bit more than 10 minutes, that's fine. It's just that from 9 to 11 on Friday morning for English 102, I will be available by my computer for those 2 hours, 100%. So even an email during that time, I'll be able to respond quickly. I've been trying to keep up on responding. Some of you have gotten responses within like a minute, and some of you I haven't gotten a chance to respond. Thank you for all of the encouragement. A lot of you have checked in and given some really direct encouragement with regard to how we're doing translating this. I really appreciate that. And I really also appreciate the folks who are a little confused and are being open about that, because I don't want this to be confusing. It's confusing for me a little, and that means it's probably confusing for you. And so feedback about what's working, what's not working is really, really helpful. So keep that coming. And also, thank you for being understanding, kind, compassionate, patient, and for being encouraging. That really has made a huge difference for my mental health during this time. And, your teacher's mental health is not your responsibility, but I'm really grateful for the kindness that you've extended, all of you. Thank you. And then finally, the Google Doc discussions. I'm really excited about those. I hope you're taking the time to return to them even after you've written your own response, because it's just so great to see everyone's thoughts on the pieces, and to see the thoughts all together on one page. A lot of the thoughts intersect and have similar kind of themes, but no two ideas were the same. And so I think there's a lot we can learn from the way our peers, the way that other people, we all look at poetry especially, because it's so open to interpretation. So I'm really excited, really impressed by that. I read through all the Palace responses this morning that are there, and it's awesome. Those grades are going to be like participation grades. So I think on your syllabus this is already how it's broken down, but 20% for each essay, 20% for participation. That's 20, that's 80%, and 20% for your final. Yeah, that's 100%, right? Somebody who's good at math, check me. So yeah, I'm pleased with how that's going. I think we'll continue that. It'll be a little different this time, and I'll get to the assignment at the end. But to give you a preview, we'll be doing a Google Doc discussion like we did before, but it won't be on a specific assigned poem. You will get to select the poem, and you'll get to select the thing you want to look at, the element of poetry you want to look at. So we're going to go over 3, although 2 of them seem sort of the same to me, or they intersect. They kind of depend on each other. So we're going to go over 3 different elements that you can find in your book. I'm going to assign some reading to you in the book as well. Once again, if you don't have the book, contact me and we'll figure out how to get you that same information outside of the book online. Sorry, I got distracted because I have these flower boxes from last summer that I never took down that are on my porch, but there's a bird sitting on it, like he lives there, and I think it'd be so cool if the birds were building nests in them. Okay, I'm so sorry, I need to stop doing that when I'm doing these things. Okay, so, I guess, let's get started. I'm already exhausted. All right, so, turn to page 8, let's do language first. Turn to page 822 in your book. We're going to look at language, word choice, and order. So I need to tune to 822. It's really irritating having this online book. This digital book. It's like so convenient because I don't have to carry anything with me, and it's always here on my computer as long as I have my computer with me, but scrolling is annoying, and it's possible that I just don't know what I'm doing, but it doesn't seem like there's an easy way to shortcut to the pages, or like there is, but sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I don't know. I'm sure I'm doing something wrong. Okay, we're almost there. Sorry, you're just staring at my face right now. Oh, God. Almost there, almost there. Is this it? No. Hold on. Okay. We've arrived. Okay. Language, word choice, and order. Like I said, this is chapter 13. It is page 822 in your book. Fiction and drama depend on language just as poetry does, but in a poem, almost everything comes down to the particular meaning and implications, as well as sound and shape of individual words. When we read stories and plays, we generally focus our attention on character and plot, and although words determine how we imagine those characters and how we respond to what happens to them, we are not likely to pause over any one word, as we may need to when we are reading a poem. Because poems are often short, much depends on every word in them. Sometimes, as though they are distilled prose, poems contain only the essential words. They say just barely enough to communicate in the most basic way, using elemental signs, each of which is chosen for exactly the right shade of meaning or feeling or both. But elemental does not necessarily mean simple. That's an important distinction. And these signs may be very rich in their meanings and complex in their effects. The poet's word choice, the diction of a poem, determines not only meaning, but also just about every effect the poem produces. So, the language that is selected when writing a poem, they use the word shade in there. I think that's a nice way of thinking about it. If you look at shading in a drawing, it gives more dimension. The way that a round object is shaded in a painting shows us whether it's a circle that's flat or whether it's like a round apple, right? It gives texture, dimension, and more life to the visual. And so it is with poems. Yeah, I mean, that's it. Every word matters, right? So they separate out under this chapter into a couple different aspects of language and word choice and diction, precision and ambiguity. So that's just how exact and precise versus how ambiguity doesn't necessarily mean unclear or confusing. It means having multiple different roots, multiple different meanings, right? So therefore, when something's ambiguous, it can be unclear, but the actual meaning of the word is the multiplicity of options within a word, right? So sometimes we want precision, and sometimes we want those multiple dimensions, the double entendres in a poem. Denotation and connotation. This is important. Actually, I'll just read this section real quick. Although the unambiguous or dictionary meaning of words, that is, their denotation, is certainly important, words are more than hard blocks of meaning on whose sense everyone agrees. They also carry emotional force and shades of suggestion. So denotation and connotation. Denotation is the literal meaning of the word. Connotation is what we connect to that word, what we attach to that word. So no word is without the baggage of history in any language. And we need to be aware of that when we are reading poems, and also for any poets out there when you're writing poems. Your own associations with a word matter, but also the general associations with a word matter, right? So language is not pure. It is not unburdened by connections and connotations, and that's an important thing to think about when we're reading poetry. And then, do they divide this up any further? Word order and placement. Individual words qualify and amplify one another. Suggestions clarify other suggestions. Meanings grow upon meanings, and thus how words are put together and where individual words are located matters. Notice, for example, that in we're not reading that part because we didn't read that part. Okay, so all of these things matter tremendously. Language is essential. I want to bring us back to last week's video when we talked about theme and tone. The tone of a piece is determined by the diction, really. Like, you don't have the benefit of actual tone of voice in writing, as we always talk about, right? You don't have the inflections of voice. So the inflections of voice have to exist in the words of the poem and in those placements of the words, where they're placed, how they're placed. Really, even the syntax of a line matters tremendously in determining tone and therefore theme. So we talked about how tone sort of unlocks the theme or can be a key to the theme. So diction, which is word choice and language, is a key to the tone, right? So are you starting to see how all these things fit together to create poetry? Okay, so the book has great examples. Under the video, I'm going to post examples of every single element of poetry we're looking at today, in addition to what I'm going to share with you here. So right now, with regard to language and word choice, I would like to look at two poets who are actually pretty experimental. We're going to do, this video is going to be like an hour, so I apologize in advance. I'm going to read you this poem called, forget the title, A New Fragrance. I was going to say Some Perfume. I'm glad I didn't make up the title. A New Fragrance by Francine J. Harris, which is this really fascinating poem that I can't quite figure out. I'd love to know what you all think. You don't have to choose to write about this poem, but if anybody does choose to write about it, I will eagerly await your interpretations. There's something about the poem that is kind of sensual, seems like a little sad or unsure. Yeah, I don't know. So I'm going to read that to you, and then I'm going to read you some work I did for it in grad school, if I still have that document up. Yes, I do. So I'm going to read you the pieces that really take apart the word choice, because Francine Harris chooses bizarre and strange words. I don't mean bizarre in a way that carries judgment. I mean exciting, new, unexpected words in this poem and in many of her poems in this book, Play Dead. And it's fascinating. And the way that these strange choices inform the meaning is exciting, but also open to interpretation. So I'd love for you to help me interpret this. I wrote a whole paper on it and I still don't know. And my mentor at the time, when I said, yeah, I have no idea what it means, he was like, yeah, me neither. That's why I signed it, because she's so great with her language, and also, what does it mean? So I'm doing the same with you. Okay, A New Fragrance. I also want you to note, first of all, this is what the poem looks like, okay? It is a prose poem. If you notice, there are fragments, sentence fragments throughout. There are no complete, well, there are some complete sentences, but there's many fragments that are separated by periods. This is obviously deliberate choice by the author. So going back to word order and how words are put together and syntax, there's some deliberate decisions to break grammatical rules, at least, or really the rules of syntax, which also connects to how the semantics works, how the meaning of this poem works. So it would be a different poem if she still used these strange words that are almost kind of elusive and beyond our grasp, but in full sentences. She doesn't. She breaks two things, or she experiments with two things: sentences and lines, and also words. So notice that. Notice where I pause. A new fragrance you can't pronounce, where the lapse in reason is the turn of a must. breaking up the bed, sweat, catch at the end of a nightstand. It's in the sweaty flowers, in the linens. Careful what you sand away from the wood. Careful with the lemons, his unzipper, his soft place strap. He has turned away and stayed. But mark it against you. Market lover, design wool air, strong against what's left. Husk over marble, over leather crush, in washer bins, in tossed sheets, elastic, the endless glove, briefly soft, cotton estranged, beyond collar, underneath seat, dug up, in cushions where he sat, carved, grass rooted in stain on the floor, all until it breathes, back it to a dressing room window, to seat a cut away. It's a buyer's river, long to a vast tweed, gabardine loop around its empty neck, a signature scruff, nothing to note, nothing to collar, to cuff, a blank suede mold, a mannequin cheek. All right, what we have there is some very accessible concrete images. A mannequin cheek. I don't expect that image, but I can picture it. I've seen a mannequin. I can imagine their cheek and the coldness of it, right? And so when we talk about language, right, the mannequin is a lifeless, physical, human-esque figurine, right, usually used for clothes. That would be the denotation. That's the definition of it. The cheek is a part of the face, this part of the face, but the connotation of it, right? I think of mannequin, I feel bloodless, hard formation, and maybe also a little fear, because mannequins are creepy and they're definitely used in horror movies. So the denotation and the connotation matter tremendously. So although that image in itself is particularly accessible, it is still very strange and unexpected, and the denotation and connotation matter a lot. And the fact that she ends the poem with that also matters a lot. How could this be a key into the rest of the poem? How does it interact with the title, which is A New Fragrance, right? I don't know. But these are things that I continue to interrogate as I read this poem and whenever I return to it. An image that is there but is less concrete, less accessible. Husk over marble, over leather crush. I don't know what husk is. I mean, I see the husk of a corn, if you've ever husked corn. Oh no, that's shucked corn. But a husk is like the shell of something. So a shell of something, a withered shell of something is what I'm imagining, but why would there be a husk over marble? And also, when we talk about word choice, especially experimental word choice, what is chosen here simply because of the way, or not simply, but how does sound matter? Husk over marble is like a really interesting sound. You've got the softness of husk, but then it ends on a hard K. Husk over is soft. Marble is round in a way in your mouth. And then over leather crush. So husk over marble, over leather crush. What is a leather crush? Is it crushed leather? Is it a crush on someone in leather, right? Okay, I'm going to stop doing this and just read to you what I wrote about this already, because it's probably more thought out than this babbling. Where were you? Okay. Ready? When I teach poetry, I always emphasize the relative smallness. This piece is called Word Choice, Divergent Meanings, and Choose Your Own Adventure in Francine J. Harris. When I teach poetry, I always emphasize the relative smallness of the space a poem occupies, and how in that space every decision becomes larger, like we just talked about. A comma, a cetera, where to break a line, word choice, to choose to say speak instead of talk, or you are instead of you are, all become rudders and oars steering the boat of the poem. I am fascinated by this intentionality, by the deliberate paintings of words within the negative space of the page. It is so different than the larger brushstrokes of fiction. It is hyperrealism rather than impressionism, even when the poems themselves are surreal. However, when I read Play Dead by Francine J. Harris, I find myself completely disoriented in a delightful, if dizzying way, by the decisions within each poem, especially with regard to word choice and word usage. The words on Harris's page seem to work harder than most words on most pages. I don't mean that the words are the poem's labor, but rather that Harris peels open words like they're bananas, and you, the reader, get to choose how you consume those words. Banana Foster, chopped bananas and Cheerios, banana bread, pudding, banana mashed, blended into a smoothie. A word within Harris's poem can mean and be 1,000 things, and the reader has agency in the direction. Harris reveals the fallibility of our belief in fixed language, how parts of speech work, how syntax works, how connotation works. Without any lack of intentionality, Harris's work challenged my idea of how poetry interpretations work. The poems of Play Dead seem to all have the same flavor, but I suspect their meanings change as often as they are read, and I suspect the interpretation of those versatile words Harris chooses are as various as her readership. In her poem, A New Fragrance, which we just read, Harris breaks language in a different way than Jos Charles does. We'll get to Jos Charles next. I guess I should have done her first, but breaks it nonetheless. Where Charles breaks open language with spelling, Harris runs through the hallway of doors that is language and opens every single one after drawing a new door on the doors. And every door within a door opens as well, and you, the reader, wander through the options of entrances, your decisions steering the rest of the experience within the poem, which is a map in your hand as you wander the hallway, changing before your eyes with every decision you make. The poem opens with, "You can't pronounce," a phrase which looks over its shoulder to the title. Already Harris has introduced us to the poem's relationship to language. A new fragrance plus you can't pronounce means, while the fragrance exists, we will never know its name. Not naming something can be as important as naming it, particularly within a poem that plays with language. From the opening, Harris positions us in a place of unknowing, which is like such an exciting place to be. The sentence directly following the opening line is, "Where the lapse of reason is a turn of a must." The line does so much with language and meaning. First, although presented as a sentence, the first word is capitalized and the line ends in a period, it is a fragment. Thus the reader is primed again for the breaking of function, at least traditional function. Then the line introduces the lapse of reason, and that there is a location for that lapse of reason. Is it in the reader's mind, the speaker's mind, the poem itself? Then there is the turn of must, which could be the where, but that means the location and place become action. When we think about the geography or map of a poem, the word choice turn becomes interesting. A turn in a poem is often the surprise, where we break through the mundane to the sublime, and though no rule that I know dictates where the turn comes, it is usually in the second half or last third of the poem. And in it's also called a volta, specifically in sonnets, and often in sonnets is the last couplet. But in this poem, in this world, the turn is introduced early, and then there are many more twists and turns. Harris pairs the word turn with the word must, which I have never seen used anywhere in my entire reading life, and certainly have never heard spoken. Through the word must, Harris introduces masculinity, animal, testosterone, and wild to the poem, which makes the turn a true poetic turn, even though it is only the second line of the poem. The word musk also seems to hold within it the word musk, which connects us back to the word fragrance in the title. A must, I believe, is, let me just double check this, because obviously I looked it up when I was writing this, but I never internalized it, but I think it's a male horse. Oh, it's not I forgot about this. Okay, so it's not the animal itself, but it is specifically in reference, it is often in reference to, well, it's not a horse. It's in reference to male animals, and it's a condition of heightened aggression and unpredictable behavior occurring annually in certain male animals, especially elephants and camels, in association with a surge of testosterone level. So that's interesting. So it's aggression and unpredictable behavior, which elucidates the idea of a turn, the turn of a must, even more. 3 lines down from the opening, Harris plays one of her tricks of language, word choice, and interpretation. The poem is a prose-style block of text, so the words and lines do not have the benefit of line breaks, making meaning even more ambiguous. Toward the middle of the 4th line in the sentence, he has turned away and stayed, followed by, but mark it against you, even though with regard to the punctuation, the first sentence is its own sentence and the following fragment is treated like a sentence, they appear to be related, not simply by content, but also because the but in the fragment is not capitalized. My brain and mind melded them together. He has turned away and stayed, but mark it against you. But then stumbled. I wanted to read, he has turned away and stayed, but marks it against you, which I think is certainly an interpretation of the 2 lines, but is not what is on the page. The verb mark is mark, not marks. It's not the singular, meaning it cannot, at least within the accepted rules of grammar, belong to the he. If the verb does not belong to the subject of the independent clause that precedes the dependent clause, then it must be a command. Perhaps the speaker is talking to themselves. Perhaps it is, I already said that. But what would that mean to mark something against yourself? I think of marks as grades. The poem is thick with furniture and bedroom imagery, so I think of notches on bedposts. I think of a black mark on someone's face. I think of Ash Wednesday. I think of the Scarlet Letter. Whatever the meaning, we are marking it against us. I do not know what this means, but I think I feel what it means. The word choice here opens so many doors, and all of them so specific to my experience as the reader, that I do not have any hope of being sure of my interpretation aligning with the writer's intention, and that is okay. All right, that's plenty, probably, because this is 40 minutes long. But anyway, I wanted you to see or hear an experience of trying to analyze language in a poem, especially a poem that is not totally accessible with regard to language, because you may choose to write about that for your essays when you get those assigned. And so I wanted you to have that experience really quickly. So word choice and language, we're going to go to somebody else experimental, who is one of my favorite poets. She is just remarkable. Her name is Jos Charles, and she wrote this book called Field. Jos Charles is, I'm going to actually read her bio. Jos Charles is a trans poet, editor, and author of Safe Space. She is the recipient of the 2016 Ruth Lilly and Dorothy Sargent Rosenberg Fellowship through the Poetry Foundation, the 2015 Monique Wittig Writer Scholarship. She received an MFA from the University of Arizona, currently resides in Long Beach, California. I follow her Instagram, and all of her pictures are beautiful. And I think she follows me back, and that was like the most exciting day of my life that she does. And sometimes she likes my pictures, and I'm gonna stop fangirling. Okay, I'm gonna show you these pieces up close. I guess I just didn't choose which one I was gonna read. I should have done that before. You know what? I don't want to dishonor her work by not reading it well. So I think what we'll do is I'll find her reading it. But let me show you what this looks like. Can you see the way the words are changed? And in some ways inaccessible. What Jos Charles has done here, which is so remarkable and new, is she has created her own language in a way, but it is language we can still access because it is based on English. So it almost is like, it's a combination of what I guess what I would call text spelling, Old English, and phonetic spelling almost. So field is spelled with 2 E's. And this, of course, can refer to a field, right? Which we would normally spell F-I-E-L-D. But it could also refer to feelings. And what would it mean if it referred to a large expanse of feelings, a field of feelings, right? Like, that's how exciting her work is. She is creating new realities through the way that she breaks apart language to then put it back together to create newness. Now, why this is particularly important and really remarkable is Jos Charles, as a trans woman in America, has lived a different experience than, a cisgendered person. And I think what she's able to do in this book is create a world in which she is the person, I don't want to say rules, they're not rules, but the person creating that world. And then as I read, I have the experience of, for a moment, feeling on the outside of it, because visually the words don't look accessible to me. But then when I get inside of it, I realize that I can find belonging and place, but also that it's not written for me. And that's thrilling, because I think that mimics the experience, or not mimics, I don't want to reduce any experience or reduce the work of Jos Charles, but what I'm trying to say is it gives us a way through poetry and through language to think about marginalized existences as they are forced to be in a dominant world. So if you, as a person, for whatever reason, are marginalized by the dominant society of which you live, there's a feeling of outsideness all the time, right? There's a feeling of being made to be small or not fit in or not work. And Jos Charles does the amazing and incredible work of world creating within her book at the level, at the word level, at word choice level and language level. And it's not like these poems are just experimental and that's the summation of them, and they're just like cool because she experiments with language. No, they're damn good poems. Like, some of them are heartbreaking. Some of them are, once you are inside of them, you realize you are in a new landscape, but it's a landscape that becomes recognizable and is welcoming. And I don't know, it almost feels like magic. Of course it's not magic, because it was very hard work, but it feels mystical to me that Jos Charles was able to do all of that in a book. Okay, without further ado, let's hear from Jos Charles. I'm going to put timestamps on this because that way you don't have to listen to everything, or at least you can have some more guidance. But I am having a lot of fun.
So this is poem 57.
Sorry. I was not dreading, but I was feeling tired and ill-equipped to make this video, but I'm enjoying so much living with these poems and with you in this space of this video. Okay, so here is Jos Charles reading. Tonight I would love to write. Let me see if I can find it, because then I can hold it up for you. I'll obviously link this video below too. Yes, found it, I think. Yes. Okay, ready? My fingernails are terrible. I need to make sure that you can see this. Okay. All right, you can see that. There.
So this is poem 57 from my recent collection, Field. I wrote this poem, it was during a month in which I had multiple friends who were all trans women who passed away, 2 by their own hand, 1 who was murdered. And I was processing that. So all these things sort of coalesced into this knot. It felt like for me I had to write. 57. Tonight I would love to write the moth in the garden, to grieve it. And as a matter of form, did you know, not a month goes by, a tran I know doesn't die. Just shy of 27, it's such a pleasure to be alive in this trembled suit you lent. Shock is a structured response, a word lost in the mouth of keepers. And you thumb at the moth, a dozen bees. I tethered these nights. I gathered so many trees.
Tethered these nights. I gathered so many trees. Did you notice how she spells the word right? It's R-I-T-E. Sorry, hold on. Which is interesting because it's not R-I-G-H-T and it's not W-R-I-T-E. But when you hear it, it calls to mind all of those words. But R-I-T-E is like a rite of passage, like a ritual action moving from one thing to the next. But she is also meaning in the connotation, the context of the sentence or the line, she is speaking about actually writing. It's just, I don't have much more to say about this because I'm not adequate enough of a thinker or poet to be able to approach this work with any kind of sophistication, at least not off the top of my head. But I did write about her too, and I can link, I'll put that in a Google Doc and link you that below the video. All right, this is 46 minutes long. I made an executive decision while we were listening to Jos Charles that it is not fair to these poets to try to stuff them all in, or poetry in general as a thing, to try to stuff them all into one video. So this is going to be our video for now. I will let you know if I will make more this week because we are running out of time, but I'd rather spend less time on drama and more time on this. I think it needs a little bit more space and time. So that's it for today. I will leave your assignments below, but what they will be is, like I said, a Google Doc, but you get to choose what you're writing about. So I'm going to link a bunch of different poems that I think that are particularly good for looking at word choice and language, and I want you to look at how the word choice is used, how the language is used, and write about that, how it supports the meaning of the poem, and how it gives meaning to the poem in a Google Doc. I will start, and also I'll share my 2 analyses. I'll put the 2 essays, the one that I read to you from for Play Dead, A New Fragrance, and the thing I wrote about Jos Charles. All right, I hope you're well.